G'day and welcome to the Genre Fiction Podcast. I'm Jack Roney.
And I'm Harry Colfer.
This week's guest is Ky Garvey, children's book author and host of Totally Lit, a monthly podcast celebrating reading, writing, and literature. The podcast features writers, illustrators, and all types of creators of books and stories. So, Ky, it's great to have a fellow podcaster on our show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jack, Harry, for having me on the show. I'm very excited.
I have to ask, how does it feel being the one answering the questions instead of being the one asking them?
My brain was almost ready to say my intro, so I have to just step back and let you guys take the wheel.
Yeah. Hopefully we don't crash.
We'll try not to.
So, Kyle, let's start by talking about your children's book. You have a children's picture book titled Easy Peasy. So, can you tell us the story behind that? What inspired the book idea, and what's the sort of target age group?
So I had been writing manuscripts with a mind to get published as a picture book author for about 18 months, and I wasn't getting any traction. And I was sat down at my laptop and I was like, okay, what is it that I need to write? And I just thought back to when I was little Kylie, what were the things that I loved? And I used to love going roller skating with my dad, and used to love the music and rolling around. And I couldn't do any tricks, but it was just like my thing that I loved to do. And I was like, okay, I'm going to write about that. And I think because it's authentic, and it reflects some of the relationship I have with my dad as well, that has resonated with publishers and with kids. So it's aimed for probably 3 to 6 year olds, although some older kids enjoy it as well. And yeah, I do get little fans come up at bookshops and let me know how much they love Ruby and they love roller skating. So that's really sweet to have that interaction and know that you're yeah, having that connection with kids, and that the goal that you had set out to do, which was to write a story that kids would love and want to read over and over again, is actually that's you've reached that goal. So that's amazing.
And do you still roller skate?
Yeah, yeah. I just saw a pair of Impala roller skates today that are silver with, like, I think it was a lightning bolt on the side. I'm like, I need those. But I still can only roll forward. I can't do anything else other than just go around the ring.
I remember doing the roller skating, going to there was one in Derby when I was a kid, and that was the sort of hangout joint. You'd go round
Yeah,
and
go
round in
on a
circles
Friday night.
repeatedly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that. The sort of big bump stop thing on the front to allow you to stop.
Yeah,
That
you
was
need your stoppers. Um, but it can be a bit dicey at this age to be, the fear is real if you hit the ground.
I
Yeah,
used to
I have been to a few people who have had those sort of injuries. Yes.
I used to be a really good skateboarder as a kid, and I tried it again as an adult, thinking, yeah, I still got it. I didn't have it. I landed on my backside,
Oh no.
bruised my spine, my tailbone a few times. Hey,
Hmm.
Kai, with just a question about writing children's books. Harry and I, we write adult crime fiction.
Mhm.
Um, when you talked about your idea for your story with children's books, does there need to be sort of an underlying theme, or is it just you've got the story idea, you want to tell a good yarn that you think kids will love?
Um, well, the answer is yes and no, I think. There, I have embedded a theme of it being okay to ask for help in my story, just because I think that, especially for women, we're taught that we can do anything, and we really need to be independent. We need to be working. We need to be a good mother. We need to be a good partner. We need to keep our house tidy. And doing all those things is a lot. Like, and as soon as life is not going to plan, it can be really difficult. And you do need to sometimes say, this is hard. I need some help. If it's from your mum or your dad, your brothers and sisters, or your friends, or or that community or village you have around you. So the theme in my book is about that, even though it is really good to try things yourself, sometimes it's okay to say, oh, okay, help, I need some help to do this. But I think picture books too can just be fun. Like there doesn't have to be a theme or lesson in the book. I mean, we want children to love words, and of course, will they love words if we're just always shaking our fingers saying this is the moral of the story? So I think there's room for both kinds of picture books, ones that have themes and explore topics that kids face every day, but then there's those books that are just a lot of fun and kids just love the words, they love the pictures, and they just want to read them again and again.
Can you talk us through the journey from initial idea to publication? So you talked about how this idea spawned, you started writing, and I imagine the process to publication, is a fairly in-depth process. Tell us your journey.
Oh, it is definitely a journey. I did originally, I was like, I'll try some picture books. I've written some short stories that I can do that. I'll build myself a platform of children's books and then I'll have time to write my novel. And of course, that's not what happens for anyone. So there is a real craft around writing a picture book. And your first draft is never the one that gets published, so that it goes through quite a lot of reiterations. Um, in that you may share it with your critique group if you're a member of a critique group. I also ended up working with an editor to help me nail it because I'm very wordy because as I said, I also write short stories and fiction for adults. So learning how to use your words succinctly and wisely and not trying to tell the whole story in the words because you've got to leave room for your illustrator as well. I had been submitting through the slush pile and feeling like I was never going to get published, and I was getting a bit down about that, which is how the podcast came about because it was something I could create with some instant gratification, I guess. So that was keeping me busy while I was waiting for responses. But I had a really good opportunity to go to an event that was being run by Squibby Queensland. And Anushka Jones from EK Books did a presentation there, and she opened up her books for us to submit. So she said for the next 2 weeks, anyone that's in attendance at this event can submit a story to me. And within 2 weeks, she'd come back to me and said, "Oh, I really loved Easy Peasy. Let's see where we can take it." So that led to a contract. So that was very exciting, especially because I'd been like, "Oh, I don't think this is ever going to happen."
And do you have to, when you're submitting or trying to pitch to a publisher, do you have the illustrator on hand, or do you have sort of ideas of what the pictures are going to look like at that point?
Usually with traditional publishing, you're assigned an illustrator. So they publishers usually have a bit of a relationship with illustrators that they've worked with, or they may have seen someone they'd like to work with. And if they think that they match your story, they'll pair you up.
Right.
And it's then a body of work that you do together.
Right. But do you have any idea of what the pictures would look like, or do you have sort of like
No, no,
penciled out
no.
ideas? No.
Um, you
Right.
don't usually get a say. I think when you're more established, that may change a little bit, but
Yeah.
early on, it's very much the publisher selects that illustrator, and you'll present it as you get like some black and white sketches and are asked to give a little bit of an opinion. But yeah, really, that the illustration is a different body of work from yours,
Right.
and so you do get to see it in certain points, but there wouldn't be too much involvement from me on what they actually look like. I was
Okay.
very lucky though. Amy Colordi is my illustrator, and she did a beautiful job.
And I was going to ask you about that process around how you communicate with your illustrator so that I suppose your vision is shared by the illustrator, and what could happen if there's perhaps a clash of visions between the writer and the illustrator. What was your process?
Well, it was for me, it was very hands off. So in terms of the illustrations, I didn't get any input other than I had, when we were getting close to the final draft, I had suggested that the boots of the skates looked different because they were more like shoes. Um, and I wanted to have them more like the trendy skates that are out at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so very little input. But I do think that the publisher knew who the right illustrator was already for me. So they had in their mind who would work best with the story that I was trying to tell. And she did a really great interpretation. But really, the illustrator is the owner of that side of the book.
Good.
And so it is their interpretation. And Amy's put little things throughout the book that are not mentioned at all, but like Dad's having a Bloody Mary in one scene, and there's a little duck he's so cute. He is through the whole book, but is never mentioned as a character, but he's actually a very strong character in the book, just with his presence, and the kids love him. So,
Yeah, I've got a friend who's another paramedic, Amy Coward, and she's produced a series of kids' books called My First Emergency. I think she's got three so
oh,
far at the
fantastic.
moment, but she's done it all as self-published. So she had to do the whole sort of finding an illustrator and then all of this sort of communication with the illustrator is what her ideas was, and and sort of that to and fro until she was happy with the representation that she had in her mind
Mm,
with what the illustrator would have. So I guess that was a lot more hands-on from her respect
yeah.
because it was self-published. Yeah.
I think too, because I'm not very visual, so I'm a word heavy creative. And I would not have been able to make my book as beautiful as Amy did. When I had it in my hands for the first time, I could not believe how wonderful it was. And I was like, I would have never have imagined those things that she has imagined. So I think that you complement each other as well. Like whatever your talent is in the involvement of the book, you can really make it shine.
I've got a
Cool.
question around you talked about, your words were telling the story, but that's also complemented by the illustrations. I think
Mm.
it's a term called the third text, where I think I learnt that from Professor Gary Crew, one of his most successful books, The Water Tower, where there's a certain text which tells part of the story, but a lot of the story is told by the visuals.
Mm.
So that, as you're flicking through the pages, there might be only a few words on the page, but the story's actually been told by the illustration and what the reader's interpreting from what they see. Was that sort of a conversation you had with your illustrator in terms of the story's been told through your words, but did she have scope to add an extra layer of storytelling through the actual illustration?
Definitely she had scope to add story. But there actually wasn't a lot of communication between the two of us, in that I had provided the words and the publisher had said, yes, we want to publish it. We'll get back to you when it's ready.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I guess it can be a double-edged sword, in that if you're a person that has a particular vision and you want to have control over everything, that's not the experience of a picture book. You do have to let those other collaborators be involved. But for me, um, I was happy to let someone do that, because I understand that the publishers are the people who've been doing it for years. They know what sells. They know, or like I wouldn't be able to order the paper and figure out the size and where will the font go and all that. I was happy to have someone handle all of that for me, and like the distribution as well. And I think that is the difference when you're self-publishing. All that work is for you to do yourself. And there are some creatives who prefer that, because then they can make it exactly what they want. Whereas I'm quite happy to work with the publisher, and get a bit of surprise at what comes out at the end.
You mentioned before about a possible ambition of writing a novel. Have you entered into long form writing, and do you have any other side projects which involve writing novels, whether they be YA, children's, or adult novels?
I have a few things in my head.
Don't we all?
I I am a pantser in every way, and honestly, I entered a writing competition last night about 45 minutes before I started writing, 45 minutes before it was due, which is
I hope it
not
was
very
microfiction.
sensible in any way. Just 500 words. It
Oh,
was,
there you go. Yeah.
although today I'm like, oh, I didn't quite nail the brief, and probably if I'd given myself more time, that would have happened. But the gold comes for me when I do that. So the story itself, I was really happy with the quality of the story, but just because there were prompts that were involved that you had to meet, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't quite nail that. So I do have two novels that I would like to write. One is more probably a middle grade to a YA, and the other one is more of an adult based fiction. I'm struggling with the creating the time to just sit down and do those. And I'm also letting that little bit of fear where I'm like, I don't know if I'm capable of sustaining a story for a novel. Like I can write 500 words, but can I write 80,000 words? So yeah, I do have in my head all the wonderful things I want to do, but I do need to now change the way I work and become more disciplined, and really sit down and just do the work, I guess.
I think it's one of those things, as as an athlete you can run, but whether you can do a marathon is a debatable thing if you're a sprinter. And it is a very different way of writing is doing that long form writing. As I've said on numerous occasions, using short stories to hone the craft is really helpful. A way of sort of like making sure that you're able to keep things succinct, and then you can then go into a more long form writing style.
So planning will be involved, which I need to learn to be better at.
Nah, it's all overrated. You don't need to. If it's an action adventure, you don't have to plan it. You can just pantser the whole damn thing.
You never know which chapter, what will come in each chapter.
That's the fun of it.
I think the story idea lends itself to either a short story in all the different forms, different word counts, or whether you've got this more multi-layered story idea. For example, I had this idea of a story, and I was thinking it could be the idea of it was like a serial killer in a desert kind of setting, like outback Australia, and I just couldn't progress it beyond the basic concept of the story and how I could flesh it out and turn it into an 80,000-90,000 word novel. Eventually, I just thought, look, I'll write it as a short story. And I wrote that, and I've just recently entered it into a writing competition, and we'll see how it goes. But the beauty of doing that is I've now got closure with that idea. I realized instead of beating myself up and thinking, how am I going to flesh this out into a novel? It was only ever going to be a short story. I've written it, dealt with it, I've put that to bed, and I can now move on with my life.
And I've had the flip side of that where I've written a short story, submitted it actually won an award, and then I'm thinking, actually, that would work as a series with those characters. And at the end of the day, it's your material. You can change it however you want and reproduce it as a novel or in a novel form.
I think writing short stories, especially when you're entering them in competitions, it's really good practice. And helpful just for getting those writing credits that you can then say, well, I've won this award, or I came here and placed in this competition, and you can start to at least demonstrate that you have some talent and you can write. And then you just have to demonstrate that you can sit down and write for that length of time.
And Ky, you've had some success with writing competitions?
Yeah, my first competition I entered was the Grieve writing competition through the Hunter Writers Centre. So they do a competition every year, and the the theme is writing about loss and grief. So I came third in that. And I always go, oh, it was a bit of an accident. But people say, well, Ky, national and international authors enter that. You do have to have written a quality piece for it to place. So it was.
It's that good old imposter syndrome, isn't it?
Oh, I'm
Even though
terrible.
you place, you still go, I'm not worthy.
So yeah, I do go, okay, that was good for a first go.
Definitely.
And thought that was a bit incidental, just that happened because I entered. The next thing I entered was Carers Queensland had a writing award for carers, and the theme was why do you care? So I wrote, it was only about 150 words, I think. And I came first for that, so that was
Well done.
good. And I think my most recent competition that I placed in was the Logan Laureate as part of their Writers Festival. But Claire Fitzpatrick and Jan Andrew Henderson.
There you go.
Yeah, so Claire came first, Jan came second, and I think I got like a bit of a runner encouragement award as third. And so for next year, my goal is to start writing some stories and essays, and targeting a few places that have a little bit of gravitas to them as well. So just to be getting my name out there a bit more and going, oh, I have this lovely picture book about here is all the other things I can do as well.
Yeah. I did check out your website, and you're currently running a competition at the moment. Is that right?
Yes, as if I'm not busy enough.
How's that going, and how does the mechanics work? I mean, I'm very interested in that.
It's been an interesting journey, actually, in terms of planning and project management. So in saying, oh, I never plan anything, this has actually been quite a lot of work to put together. And I have had a wonderful virtual assistant helping me with some of the background stuff. But yes, I decided that as part of Totally Lit, I wanted to provide an opportunity for writers to submit to a competition. And so I started just researching other competitions and their guidelines and how do they work? How can I make this work? I did have some support from a web designer as well, because just learning the nitty gritty of, oh, how does that actually work? How do they submit? Where does that file go once they hit the button? How do they make payment? So all that stuff that I didn't really know about, I've got a little bit of a crash course in, and then just reaching out and learning how to do the media and PR around it. And okay, who needs to know about it? How early do I need to say, here's the competition? How much time do I need for people to write and enter the competition? How long do our judges need to judge? And so all those sort of things. And I have made it a bit of fun by that there's a code word that you need to use in your story, and you have to listen to a podcast episode where
That's a very good idea.
given the code word. And because I'm a carer of two boys with special needs, I decided that I would also like to support the Carers Foundation. So $5 of every entry will be donated to them. And it's also just to raise some awareness. So last week was National Carers Week, so I planned for this to run during October. And there's also an opportunity for carers. There's a special scholarship there for them. So those carers that want to write, they can win a 30-minute time slot with Edwina Shaw to do some creative coaching. And then there's also a spot at her retreat as well.
Fantastic.
So that I really wanted to give that opportunity to those carers that they don't get time for themselves or to explore any of their creativity and talents, because they are giving to the people they love, and they do it because they love the people they care for. But I think that you when you're becoming your best self, it means you're a better parent and a better carer to the person you're looking after if you're strong and healthy. So that was why I wanted to
Excellent.
do this.
And if this goes out tomorrow, then you'll have at least a week to get your competition entries in.
Yes, there's still time.
So anyone who's interested in the competition, where do they find out more information about it?
I've been posting all over social media, so you might be sick of seeing that. But also if you go to my website, which is kygarvey.com, and there's a drop-down tab towards the right, and it's got the Totally Lit podcast and then a drop down to the microfiction competition.
Well, this sounds like a fantastic initiative. So congratulations for setting that up, and best of luck with all, I guess, all the work that's still to come once all the entries start flooding
all
in.
the reading.
Is it just you doing the judging?
I've got a wonderful panel of judges. So I have Cheryl Gwither, Lauren Elise Daniels, Denise Flynn, and Pamela Jeffs. So they're very well-established short story writers and have won a myriad of awards. So I was actually thrilled that they all agreed to come on board. So they've all got a keen eye and know what good writing is. So I've been really kind of overwhelmed by the support I've received from my writing friends and colleagues. Because you try these things that it's like, is this going to work? And then when you see the people around you have faith in you, it's just like, oh, okay, that's good. This is going to work. Nice.
Yeah, well done. That sounds like a great initiative. Can we move on to now your podcast? So Totally Lit is your podcast, which I see, incidentally, you've just had your 5th birthday. So congratulations.
It's coming 31st of October is the birthday. So I've just put some feelers out that for people who would like to send a birthday message, they can record one and I'll include it in the podcast episode.
Brilliant.
So you mentioned before that you kind of started the podcast idea when you were sort of pitching your book and you were sort of in a period where you wanted to be creative. So you got your you started with your podcast. So I'm interested in what was the initial idea that spawned in terms of what sort of podcast you wanted to create?
Originally, I wanted to create a true crime podcast because I love them. I'm addicted to them. My husband is worried I'm in training to be a serial killer. But I knew that I didn't have the time or probably the discipline as well, if we're honest, to be doing a weekly podcast which involved a lot of research. And I was like, I just don't have the time. I would love to do that, but I don't think it's doable. And I just had played around with some ideas. And I was like, well, I'll do a podcast on writing. But who's going to want to listen to me droning on about nothing? Because I originally was like, oh, I'll share this process of what it's like to be that day you just decide to write and then you become a writer, but then you have to become published. And like it is challenging and difficult. And I was like, oh, I'd love to share that. But I feel like I'm like that imposter syndrome comes in. It's like, oh, I don't think I'm an authority on anything at the moment. Oh, why don't I interview people who are? So then I just kind of started sidling up to some of my writing friends and going, oh, I've got this idea. Would you like to be on the show? And it just kept growing and growing. And I just didn't give up as well. It could have been very easy to, after the first few months, just to go, oh, that was fun. I'll try something different now. But yeah, I've just kept pushing and growing, and it's been a wonderful experience because I get to speak to amazing authors that I would never usually have exposure to. And I learn so much as well. Like having a one-on-one with an extremely talented author is like, it's gold.
I mean, I obviously we started as a threesome with our podcast, and it was just us chewing the fat, to be quite honest. But then we realized that we needed to sort of like branch out and bring other people in, otherwise we'd get rather boring because it would be just saying the same old crap over and over again. But I hats off that you're doing it on your own because, obviously if there's those sort of pregnant pauses, one of us can jump in.
Yes.
When it's just one of you, it's sort of like, oh my God, I've got to keep going, and I'm sure that sort of could be quite daunting.
Oh,
It would be
I'm
for me
very
anyway.
lucky that my guests love to talk about their work. So,
Talk about themselves.
well, no, I won't say that. Just in case any of them are listening. But you can have really engaging, interesting conversations with people, and it's just about thinking about what you want your episode to be like as well. And I'm not strict with my scripting, but I do have like a loose outline of what every episode will be.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a bit of critical thinking. Like I went and did my Bachelor of Arts, and that was the whole point of doing all of that, was to learn how to interpret and to I guess probe and be curious. And so that I
Yeah.
think that is my biggest asset, is that I'm curious. So I always want to know, how did you do that? What happened when you did that?
Mm.
What will my listeners enjoy about this? So, yeah, sometimes the questions will just come into my head at the time, and other times I'll have planned ahead and gone, oh, okay, I know this writer writes about this theme. I really want to explore that more.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really just about thinking about what other people would like to learn and hear about as well.
And do you have quite a broad approach to, having a podcast about writing generally? Um, do you like to keep it fairly broad, and you're not sort of focusing on a particular niche of writing? You're keeping it fairly general?
Yeah, really, well, I guess really the focus is about the craft in terms of, yeah, I want to hear about the process, and how to overcome challenges and things like that. Um, so it's not really about, this person has this book, this is where you buy it. Like I want to know about, how did the book come about? Why did you explore those themes? What
Yeah.
challenges did you have here? And so I've also like spoken to filmmakers and musicians, and like I want to explore every facet of what is art with the written word. Like I want to know about, how did the book come about? Why did you explore those themes? What
Yeah.
challenges did you have here? And so I've also like spoken to filmmakers and musicians, and like I want to explore every facet of what is art with the written word.
Yeah.
And I
I
think
mean,
that's
that's
kind of
that's sorry, go on.
Sorry, I think that's kind of what we've tried to achieve as well with our podcast, is that with every episode there's some sort of, we're imparting some information or advice to whoever happens to be listening, because as we know as writers, sometimes you can be sitting alone, and it's nice just to hear other people talking about things that you've often wondered about, or the fears that you've had, or the frustrations. When you're hearing other people talking about it, I think it's what we're trying to do is to share that information to kind of help people.
And it can be, I probably don't go into like the nitty gritty of writing, but I do want to know about, how did you get started? What was it that made you decide that first time that you would write something? How did you get published? What has
Yeah.
made you stay in the industry? I mean, because it is hard work to be a writer and have a
Definitely.
career. So yeah, I just love to hear about it all.
I think it's important for people who listen to these sort of podcasts that authors are actually just normal people,
Yeah.
and the fact that they don't find it easy. It's not sort of like a case of, oh, I'm going to write a novel, and a week later, boom, there you go, and it's published. The learning that, or hearing from the horse's mouth that no, it's a goddamn long process. It's really hard. And if you want to achieve it, and if you want to get published or self-published, it's still a lot of work, and you've got to be committed. And I think that's important, a message to get across to people, because often they think it's like this quick fix. I mean, I got into writing because I thought it was be a quick way of making some money, and I was sorely disappointed.
I'm laughing so much at that one.
Aren't we
Yeah,
all?
what a fool.
And that's similar often when I'm speaking with people about podcasting, they have an idea that there's a lot of money in podcasting. I'm like, no.
Oh, you're
It's
not
all from
sending
love.
the envelope to us, the brown envelope with the cash in it? A bit difficult to do on Zoom.
Yes.
So just talking about the specifics of podcasting, if there are people listening to this that are interested or perhaps even have started their own podcast, you seem to have quite a strong following. You've just notched up your first 5 years. What's worked for you in terms of growing your audience and getting cut through in an industry where there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of podcasts out there. What has worked for you to build your audience and your brand?
Well, the first thing is just not giving up, that persistence of, okay, my first episode had 20 downloads. Okay, wrap it up. No. So for me, I was like, okay, I'll just keep trying and going. And it's like anything that you do. Some weeks are great weeks, other weeks it feels like nobody is listening at all. But also, yeah, really thinking about what the content is that you want to provide. And I think that's been a great learning curve for me. And also when I'm out and about chatting to writers, I'm kind of always a little bit in podcast mode, that I'm listening and asking questions about what they're wanting to learn about, and even if they're saying about other podcasts that they're listening to, I'm always like, oh, okay, so they're interested in that. But I think if you're asking for someone to listen to you for 45 minutes, you've got to provide them with some value. And so I did sit down and do quite a bit of planning and scheduling and thinking about who are the authors that I would like to have on the show. So for 2024, I was like very strategic about coming in strong and having some really quality authors that people want to hear from. But also making sure that I'm asking questions that are interesting. And it can be difficult as well to keep people on point and keep them on track. And sometimes you have to push if there's something you would really like to know about. Although I always try to treat my guests with respect and get the vibe if I need to back off, if I they don't want to go too deep on a topic or something like that. But yeah, I think it's just not giving up, but also thinking about what value you're actually bringing to the world as well. Because it's not just about throwing something out there and going, please listen. It's like, well, thinking about, well, why would someone listen? So
Yeah. And now that you're can I say dabbling in both podcasting, or you're doing more than dabbling, you're quite established as a podcaster and you're an author. Do you consider yourself, I guess maybe you started as an author and then you sort of transition into becoming a podcaster. How do you see yourself? Are you a mix of both, or are you more one than the other?
well, I would say at the moment I'm much more of a podcaster than I am a writer at the moment. And 2025, I do want to change some of that a little bit. But I think as authors, we've always got to be diversifying, because we're in a world where most of responses are visual, so social media, websites. So we're asking people to take time to read our work, but we have to get it out there somewhere as well. So I kind of look at the podcast as one arm of my creative practice. So but I would like to have that even up a little bit, where I have more written work out there than spending all the time on the podcast. But I do really enjoy the chats, and that's like, oh, I'm so excited. Who am I talking to this week? So that, it is a bit of an addiction at the moment. And my husband and I are having a talk about it, I think. Because
I like that. We're having
because
a talk.
even though it
Is it not a
appears
podcast?
he does all of my tech work for me and all the editing. So he makes myself and my guests sound fantastic. So even though I am the one at the front and it appears that it's just me. It's actually we're a team together, which I actually really enjoy as part of my marriage, that we're working on similar goals. But I would say the editing is much more hard work than me sitting chatting to people. So
Ask Harry, he'd tell you it's easy.
Yes, easy. I don't know. I just talk, I just chat, and then Jack sorts it all out. I'm sure that's going to change next year when I've got more time.
Yes, yes. Ky, how do you juggle your commitments? You said that you're a carer of two boys. Yeah, and with the challenges of raising a family and juggling all these commitments, how do you sort of prioritize and manage those commitments?
It is a challenge. Sorry, I'm saying too much. I was just in the kitchen cooking dinner and it's all on low, ready for when we jump off. So I work during the day. I podcast and write at night. Weekends are writing events. And yeah, I just fit things in the cracks. So I dashed out this afternoon to help my son buy a new mobile phone. Uh, it's always on. It keeps me sane though, I think, especially we've had some challenges in our lives, and for me to have a sense of purpose that is outside of that is really helpful. And a feeling of that I can do things when I set my mind to it. So that me having goals to work towards really helps me feel grounded. And the boys now are adults as well, so they're 18 and 21. So it's helping me with that little bit of emptiness syndrome as well, where even though they do need me in ways that other teenagers their age don't, it does, as I watch them flourish and become men, I'm not feeling like I'm empty and don't have anything of my own. So finding my own identity has been really good for me. So, but there is lots of scheduling and calendars and going, oh, this happened. Okay, we have to change. Yeah, so just the ability to not always crumble when you set challenges as well.
I think it's funny because I've got a household of ADHDers, and basically I can't wait for it to be just me and the missus.
I can't imagine how quiet will be.
I don't have any problem with empty nest.
Well, we started empty nesting, but my 24-year-old is doing a boomerang and he's coming back. We've already got rid of two, and there's only one left. Now one's
I'm
coming
selling
back.
the house. I'm managing to get rid of them by selling the house.
I think I'm not sure if it's the same for men, but I think women, their identity is very wrapped up in their family and their children. And there's a point where your children leave the nest and you're left figuring out who you are.
Yeah, fair point.
So
my missus is one of the ones with the significant ADHD, and she's quite happy to get rid of them.
It's like, bye, see ya.
Yeah, bye. We've got other stuff to do. So yeah.
So Kyle, we're starting to run short of time, and I'm conscious that you do need to attend to dinner.
you got your dinner.
Speaking of all these family
There'll
commitments,
be some
so
people
just
knocking
before
down
we,
the door in a minute.
yeah,
Where's dinner, Mum?
before we do wrap up, what's on the forecast for you now?
Well, the writing competition is going to keep me busy through November, and I'm really hoping that if this is a successful project, that it's something I can run every year. Because I'd really like to create something out of all of this that I'm doing. So I guess having the podcast, having a competition, I'd love to have an anthology of some sort out as well. I did have some really good meetings over the weekend at a BSAB conference, which is the Brisbane Story Arts conference here for children's writers. So I had some meetings with some publishers and editors and got some good feedback. So I'm feeling optimistic there'll be some more picture books in my future. And I have been trying to pitch an anthology that will be a call out to carers to write around their when they receive the diagnosis for their children, and exploring those feelings, to share with other carers who are just starting on their journey, just so they can realize that what they're feeling, whether it's fear, anger, or just relief, to know what the answer is and how to move forward, like that all those feelings are valid, and natural, and that they're not alone. I think that is my mission, is whether it's writers or whether it's carers, with anyone, I just want them to feel like that they're not alone, that there's other people that are experiencing that same journey.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations for what you've achieved, Ky, and I'm sure that because you are driven by that sort of key message, that I'm sure you are helping people, and the people that are listening to the advice that you're sharing. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to Harry and I, and we'll certainly follow your podcast, and good luck with all your future endeavors as well.
Thank you so much. I feel like I'm not used to talking so much in a podcast. I like to sit back and let my guests do all the talkings. But thank you for your questions. It's been very enjoyable.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll say goodbye now. Best of luck getting dinner sorted, Ky, and no doubt we will cross paths very soon. All the best, everyone,
No
and we'll say
problem.
goodbye.
All the best with the competition.
Okay.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.